Welcome to the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Dobie. Join Jason as he explores the many ways to unlock personal growth, mindfulness, and spiritual transformation. So now, please welcome the host of Transformative Pathways, Jason Dobie.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Dobie, founder of Transformative Pathways Life Coaching. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, I'll be discussing the advantages of a daily spiritual practice with our guest, Mr. Michael Pedersen, who's joining us today from New Jersey. Michael is a self-described greasy biker in disguise who spent the last 30 years navigating the corporate world. Starting as a dispatcher in international logistics, Michael's career took him across the globe and culminated in his role as Director of Engineering for the Americas region at one of the world's largest shipping lines. Recently, Michael made a dramatic shift from the safety and predictability of corporate to pursue his passion for writing. His first book, titled My Brother Mark, imagines an alternative path, what life could have been if his spiritual awakening had happened at the age of 16 instead of 36. It envisions a journey where he follows his heart rather than living according to someone else's vision. Michael, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jason. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for asking me to be a guest on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, man. So I guess to start things off, Michael, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and what led you to embark on your spiritual journey?
Sure. Spirituality, it rolls up in a number of different forms. Many people talk about spiritual awakenings, and there's a wide spectrum, anything from, the white light, oh my God, transformative experience to, the long process educational variety. And mine was really kind of the latter, coming to, I was brought up in a religious household, and the dogma just didn't work for me. I just, kept coming back to, questions that couldn't be answered, and I had a lot of questions, so starting to, embark on a more spiritual path, combined with, trying to succeed in life, and trying to make your way, in a world that, really kind of demands, you have to step up, you have to perform, you have to produce, you have to, you have to get the car and the house and the wife and all these different things in order to be successful. I was kind of told at a very young age that, you're not going to make any money following your dreams. So I kind of bought into someone else's definition of success, what it was to be successful. For me, the idea of a car that I didn't have to work on was successful, because I, drove, rusty pieces of junk, with tools in the back, in the trunk, because the thing broke down all the time. So I kind of bought into this society's, version of, what it is to be successful, and the more I achieved and the more success, I realized, granted, life was really, really good, but, it still wasn't fulfilling. There was really kind of still, something missing, so I started, just kind of exploring, looking around, what are the different, I explored different religions, and, people, I hear people say, things like, well, religion is for people that are afraid to go to hell, and spirituality is for those of us that have been there. There's some truth to that, but, there are certain dogmas that, if that works for you, if whatever your faith is or your religion is, if that works for you and allows you to treat people, well, and navigate humanity with kindness and compassion, then, I don't find that it's an either or. For me, a lot of the religions that I've studied, and I studied, Catholicism, Judaism, Buddhism, I've participated in a number of different, religions. And the message is really kind of, they're really all the same. It's really all rooted in compassion, So, for spirituality, my spirituality is based, I've listened to your podcasts, and we've worked together, quite a lot. a lot of the concepts of Buddhism, kind of resonate for me as trying to figure out, why my mind operates the way that it does. So, it's been a winding path, but the biggest part of, spirituality and, spiritual awakening, what does it mean to be spiritually awake? First off, what is spirituality? And people can define, in different, different responses. Your spirituality is what you believe. It's the beliefs that you hold in your heart that kind of guide the way that you navigate humanity and the people that, the universe sends to you that cross your path. So whatever those beliefs are, I know a lot of people are like, listen, I'm not a spiritual person. If you didn't climb into your neighbor's window and steal all his stuff last night because you believe that's wrong, you're basically a spiritual person. You're what you believe. Your whole idea of right and wrong guides your actions. This is your spirituality, and that's it at its it's at its base level, and then you build on it and you grow from there. The act of spirituality, a spiritual daily practice helps us stay spiritually awake and helps us, the whole idea of spirituality is paying attention. I can't sit here, on your podcast and talk about all these wonderful things, and how good it is to be a spiritual person, and then go drive on the sidewalk and give people the finger and cut people off and everything. The whole idea is, what is a daily spiritual action, spiritual practice that helps you carry it out, into the day. So that's really kind of, it's been a long road, but it's a constantly evolving road. I don't know if you can identify with that, but certain levels where I'm like, oh, this is the pinnacle, and then more awaits.
No, I love that, and I can relate to your story a little bit too. Like, I didn't work in the corporate world. I was a chef working in a restaurant for 26 years, but I had all the things that was supposed to make me happy. I had the good job, I had the good salary, I had all the toys, that I wanted. But then one day I realized I'm not happy, and there was a big, hole inside of me that I needed to fill. And that's when I remember one day I realized, okay, wait a minute, I can spend the rest of my life doing this job that I hate and being miserable, or I can do something different. And then that's the day that I realized, okay, wait a minute, I'm in control of my life and I can do whatever I want. And then that was a couple of years ago. And that's when everything kind of shifted. And I love the concept of, and this is something that Sri Lanka used to talk about too, that everything is spiritual. And I think I didn't really understand that, but I think I kind of understand it now. Everything you do is spiritual. I like the way you described it there.
Yeah, it really is. And the reason that it is spiritual is that, everything really kind of bounces back to us. It's how do you live your life? Does life happen to you? Does life happen with you? Does life happen for you? Those three are perspectives. It's really kind of how you view the world. For a long, long time, I was like, I got really despondent, as I achieved higher and higher levels, of success in my career, it wasn't fulfilling. And it was like, where is this level of fulfillment? Why isn't this happening? And the idea is that I was looking for sources outside of myself to validate or fulfill me, and I don't care, we call it the God hole. You can throw as much stuff in there, success, money, drugs, relationships, whatever you want. You can throw as much stuff in there, you're never going to fill it. Because it's, it really doesn't exist. Everything that we have, we already possess, and we lose track of that, through our lives. We get constantly bombarded with these images. It's like, wow, look at that person on TV, they're smiling and they use that toothpaste. So if I get that toothpaste, I'll be happy too. And you get the toothpaste and you're just as sad as you were before. There's no, and then what it becomes is it becomes the chase. We become addicted to the, if I get the right he, she, it thing, that chase becomes really, really powerful. And a lot of messages that achieve, perform, excel, do more. It doesn't lead to where you want to go. It doesn't lead to a fulfilling life. It's just a constant pursuit of something that's never achieved.
Exactly. And that thing that we're looking for is inside of us the whole time.
Mhm.
It's not something outside. Is the sound okay there?
Yeah, it sounds great. Sounds
Okay.
great. Yeah. And that really kind of goes back, to the other side of that. The misconception that we have is that, the happiness lies outside of us. The happiness lies within us, but based on our beliefs and how we live our lives as to whether we're going to be happy, in that respect or not. You know, um, your spirituality influences your behavior negatively or positively. You know, whether or not, I espouse certain beliefs that there is a certain way to live, that, you need to be honest, you need to treat people right. You need to be, you can't go around, stealing things. And, you have to be guided by, for me, a spiritual person is someone who, like I said, is spiritually awake. I'm guided by my beliefs. I'll give you a perfect example. Years in corporate, it's like, I didn't buy any pens. I didn't buy any paper. I didn't buy any paper clips. Those things just magically found their way into my briefcase, on the way home. Because, hey, they want me to do this job. I need these supplies. Well, why am I sneaking them out in my briefcase instead of carrying them out the door for everyone to see? Because I know deep down I'm being dishonest. It's taking stuff that doesn't belong to you is stealing. And it's that level of getting to that point where, say, listen, I'm really just justifying this behavior, and I can't continue to do that and be a spiritual person. That creates, when I act in such a way that is in direct opposition to what I believe, it creates dissonance, it creates pressure, it creates tension, it creates stress. And there were, I worked for a lot of different people, for a long time, and there were a lot of good people in the industry that I worked in. There were a lot of people that, um, were less than authentic. Let's put it that way. And when you come into a situation and you really are an authentic being, and you refuse to compromise on your integrity, there's not a you don't always get acceptance for that. It's a lot of times it's, profit at whoever's expense. I think that the corporate world is really, really, somewhat short-sighted. Building all of these, if you look at, there's a couple of uh, documentaries that have looked at, like all the waste in the world. We have this magical place called away. We just throw things away. They don't go away. They go somewhere else, and someone else has to deal with it. So the idea of, being forward thinking, being long-term thinking, being conscientious about the environment and the people. And a lot of times it gets, we say character building gets lost in the dust of, the pursuit of happiness. The idea is putting things, delaying gratification because it's the right thing to do. A lot of times is not always accepted, or not always looked on kindly, especially in a corporate world, in a profitable world. Putting yourself aside for the benefit of other people. I think that's a mindset that is coming to fruition and is coming more and more to light through communities like this, and just discussions like this. But it's a mindset that's going to have to change in the world. But if you don't like it, you can complain about it, or you can help to change it. And if you're not helping, you really don't have much right to complain about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting away from that instant gratification. Everyone's addicted to, instant gratification. And
Mm.
on the topic of a daily spiritual practice, I'm curious, Michael, what sort of things you do for your daily spiritual practice?
Um, I meditate daily. I pray every morning. I meditate in the evening. I do theta brainwave meditations in the evening. Typically in the morning, I sit, with a Mahayana tradition. It's a Tibetan Buddhist There's really two types of meditation, which are there's a single pointed meditation, a focused meditation, and then there's an analytical meditation. Analytical meditation, I will take a concept like anger, define it. What's the definition? What are the consequences in my life when I walk around angry all day? What are the consequences in my life when I deal properly with my anger, and obtain a peaceful state? And then which way do I want to be? And then there is a single pointed meditation, a focused meditation. And this is really, really critical. I meet a lot of people all the time and they're like, oh, I can't meditate. My mind doesn't shut off. It's not going to. It's not supposed to.
No.
Your mind, that's its job. But
Yeah,
the idea
exactly.
is that we can, kind of become the observer. You get to step back, and what it is, it's recognizing that moment. And I'll give you an example. There's a gentleman that I work with named Hector Marcel. He was one of the founders of an organization called Three Jewels in New York City. It's a Doha on the Lower East Side, and they have a mix of physical and spiritual and mental. They do yoga, they do meditations, they do all kinds of retreats and things like that. But Hector's really, really cool. He's called, if you want to check him out, he's called the Wake Upist. If his handle on Instagram, and he's
Okay, cool.
the idea is like, and he gave a story. He said his sister was having her first child, and she's very close. He's very close with his sister. So his sister invited him, to the birth. So he's there in the delivery room. She gives birth to the baby, and the doctor hands him this, this goo covered thing, that is really, really disgusting, and he was just overcome with joy holding this baby in his hands, just overcome with, like, there's nothing in the world that could ever make me sad again, this total feeling of bliss and happiness and joy. And then he looked around the room, and the doctor, this was the first, like the fifth baby he had delivered today. He's like, here, hold this. And then, the father, the husband, was on the floor in the corner with an oxygen mask because he had passed out in the middle of, the wife is on the gurney screaming for morphine. So where did that overwhelming feeling of joy come from? It's a serious question. Where does it come from? Where does it originate from? Because if it came from the baby, if it came from this new life that he was holding in his hands, then everyone in the room would feel the same thing. But everyone has a different reaction. So that feeling of bliss, of joy, of, absolutely everything being fantastic, he realized originated within him. And with that realization, you can recreate that. That feeling is there for you to call up any other time. It also means that whenever I'm aggravated, discontented, or upset, it's my issue. It's my issue. When I get angry with my wife, it's not up to her to fix it. I'm the one that's upset. I have to look at, why am I upset? It's my problem. The other person is obviously not, having a bad day. The person who ticked me off on the subway or cut me off in traffic. It's my problem to deal with. So the idea is that I can react to situations in life really however I choose, but that is part of a spiritual practice. And when you focus in meditation on a concentrated meditation, what happens is you sit and you focus on a single object, your breath, an image of, something that's, important to you, the Buddha or Jesus or whatever it is. And you hold that image of in your mind. And as you hold that image in your mind, after 20, 30, 40, 50 seconds, however long it is, your mind starts to think about, I have to go shopping next Tuesday, and eggs are on sale, and I got to remember to pick up because this and this, and I have to go see, and as soon as I'm done with this, I got to call and then you catch yourself and you say, that's right, I'm not shopping, I'm meditating. Let me go back to my breath. And it's that moment. That is the reflex that you're really trying to cultivate of, oh yeah, that's right, I was off in a dream. Let me come back and focus on this moment. Because it is that same reflex that catches me from creating chaos in my life, or just situations in my life where I behave poorly. You know, perfect example. I have, we're coming into Christmas. Today's the solstice. We're going to have, a bunch of days of family, and I can have a good time, or I can surrender my serenity to these people and say, here you go, take it, because I can definitely give them the power to do that, or I can catch myself. It's that moment where I'm just about to go, man, how can you be that stupid, and shut up. It's that catching myself in the act of being self-righteous. And that's really kind of the basis of that spiritual practice, because that's the same thing. Somebody cuts me off and I'm like, I'm going to show, wait a minute, hang on, wait a minute, stop. Who's upset here? This guy is going to cut off another 10 people. I'm not the police. It's not, for me to go and chase him down and cut him off again, all I'm going to do is aggravate myself. Do you want to have, my friend Bobby C has got a great, line. He says, you want to be right, or do you want to have a nice day? Because a lot of times you can't have both. So the spiritual practice is really that meditation in the morning is touch point. And I've been doing this for years, and I know Tibetan Buddhists that have been meditating for 25 years, and they can get their mind to stop for about 2.5, maybe 3 minutes. And that's after practicing for years and years. Your mind is supposed to think. It's that reflex of, oh yeah, that's right. This is what I believe in. I'm not going to react. So that's what you're training as far as a spiritual practice. What you're training is to be paying attention. What is awareness? What is mindfulness? Pay attention to what's coming out of your mouth. Pay attention to how you treat people. Pay attention to how you interact with your coworkers, how you interact with the lady at the grocery store. One of the things I realize is that after, many, many years of corporate and stress and trauma, I walk around most of the time looking like this. And people are like, wow, you look really angry, and I'm not. So I physically have to soften my face and walk around and walk through the supermarket smiling. People smile at you. People smile. People are just waiting for someone to smile at. They're waiting for someone, to. There's so much stress and anxiety in the world that we live in. Just the idea of changing the way that I face my reality on a daily basis is one of the biggest keys of my spiritual practice, because I deal with anxiety, I deal with depression, I deal with these things. So I can go and take a handful of pills, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you are depressed and you have anxiety and you go see the doctor and they want to prescribe for you, fine. But if you want to find a way to just deal with that without all those things, and you don't want to have that interaction in your life, you can. And that's the essence of that, is really kind of cultivating a spiritual life. And it starts, like I said, it's a practice. This is something that you'll probably never perfect, not in this lifetime, but I need to practice it. I need to, so meditation, being on the cushion, is one thing. The hardest part of the spiritual practice is carrying that out into one of the most congested areas of the country, where everyone, I call New Jersey the me first state. Everybody's me first. You're not getting in front of me. Me first, me first. How do you deal with that? You can get upset, or go ahead. You're obviously much more important. You obviously have much more important things than me to do today. So please, by all means, go ahead. It's not worth surrendering my serenity to people like that, on a daily basis. And it's my responsibility as to whether I want to have a good day or not. And really kind of the essence of a spiritual practice is, do you want to be happy?
Wow, Michael, you said so much right there, man. Like we're in control of how we feel. That's one thing I've been practicing a lot lately. And no matter what, the main practice I've been focusing on lately is, no matter what circumstance I'm in, I should be in control of my emotions. So that's one thing I've been really working on lately. And I really love what you said about how a meditation practice like that building that muscle of bringing yourself back every time your mind wanders, how that's going to help you in other parts of your life. And I think, I can see that in my life, even, with my kids. I get that moment where instead of freaking out when something happens, I have that space in between where I can make a decision of how I want to react. Whereas, if you don't have that, then I guess, that's what they call just living on autopilot. You're not really in control of your actions. You're just on autopilot, and you're freaking out and you're pissed off every day. And that's how I lived most of my life. And also wanted to say the main reason why I started meditating was because of stress and anxiety. And I used to call it my antidepressants because it helped me with my depression. And I'm so glad that I never went on any sort of medication. And I know medication is good for some people, but I heard someone say once that I listened to a podcast called Take Back Your Mind by Michael Beckwith, and I've listened to every single episode. And he talks about leaving the house without meditating in the morning is like leaving the house without brushing your teeth. You have that yucky feeling all day. You know that feeling when you leave the house without brushing your teeth? But
I do, and I catch myself every once in a while. It's like, I'll be, 10, 11 o'clock. It's like, why am I having such a crappy day? Oh, I rushed out the door. I forgot to meditate. I forgot to pray. Stop. And even if you did that morning, something happened during the day, you can stop and go back, find a broom closet, go and just sit for 15 minutes with yourself and quiet your mind. To go back to kind of, Hector's story, the idea of the joy doesn't originate outside of us. The anger doesn't originate outside of us, as well. It's really very, very important to understand perspective. Pen, right? It's a pen. It's a pen. Pen, pencil, you write with it. This is what we do with these things. We write it. It's a pen. Now, if I throw it on the floor and let my dogs in the room, it becomes a chew toy. They will literally find it and chew it up and destroy it. Well, we can agree that a thing can't be two things at the same time, right? It has to be one or the other. So where does pen come from? The understanding is that this is a collection of plastic parts that was put together by somebody in a factory. It's a pen because I call it a pen. My mind assigns it the value of pen. The important thing to understand is that this thing in and of itself doesn't hold those attributes. It all comes from my mind. I say this is pen. Dogs call it a chew toy. Prove it. Well, I write with it. Dogs chew on it. A thing can't be two things at the same time. So the idea is that the qualities of pen come from my mind. And what that means is that as I go throughout my day, I assign qualities, good, bad, different people that I meet, different situations that I be in. It all comes this way, not this way. So life is really how I choose to see it and how I choose to perceive it. So if I'm upset, and I'm having a crappy day, I'm sitting on the subway or on the bus or whatever, and I'm really, really not happy, nothing else is going to fix me. Society, just you can go home and have a drink, put your feet up, buy a lazy boy, put on your 65-inch widescreen, and you'll be fine. I do all those things and I'm still upset because I haven't changed the perspective. And the idea is that I get to see, how I perceive, the world. And when I approach it with that way, then I can work on changing that. And it's funny, and then it comes back to the spiritual practice, of catching myself. I'll start, the other day, somebody in the store, rammed, the back of my heel with their shopping cart, and I turned around and I started, what the heck? And I caught myself. And he didn't mean it. They didn't mean it. It just, it was unexpected. It caught me off guard. They weren't trying to, be mean to me. It was just, and I catch myself in those moments where I'm about to react poorly. And when I react poorly, I plant that negative seed. But when I turn around and say, "Oh, it's okay. I understand. No problem," and step to the side and let the other person go, obviously, they tell you what, you want to go ahead of me, instead of ramming into the back of my feet while I'm waiting in line, why don't you go ahead? You're obviously in a rush. Let that person go. It's how I choose to react to the situation, but it's that catching myself when I'm about to react badly. And, in the very, very beginning, it's not an altruistic practice. This is, you get tired of saying I'm sorry for my crappy behavior all the time. For when I'm running around, like you said, stumbling from moment to moment, blindly, without purpose, just stumbling through the day, not paying attention, we create wreckage, we create chaos. If I take into consideration how every interaction that I have, from the person at the checkout to my wife or my boss, you know, if I take into consideration how my interactions are going to affect that, you can, somebody, that cashier can be having the worst day of their life, you know,
Mhm.
and you have the ability to change that. That's really kind of the essence of a spiritual practice. And it's really is the spiritual axiom is that the less I focus on me, the happier I become, and it doesn't mean that, I don't take care of myself and I don't watch out for myself, but getting out of my own head and my own selfish desires and selfish wants and seeing how I can be an asset, because I really, really believe, the universe put me here. We're here in life, for two reasons, to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So how do we do that? A lot of times it's coming in and realizing that, wow, my wife is really stressed out. She really had a bad day. Let me see if I can maybe do, what? Let me cook dinner tonight. Sit down and go relax. You were reading that book, go sit somewhere. And I'm just as tired as she was. But to do that really makes me feel good, and it plants that seed, of kindness, of compassion, and that's really kind of, what it looks like. If I'm driving and I can make the leap from effing a-hole to, oh, you poor bastard, that is compassion. Look at this person, look at how lost they are. Look at he's going to cut off another 8 people today. I hope he doesn't get in an accident. I really, really, hope this person, finds their way in this life. When you can make that jump, because when I get aggravated at somebody else, that aggravation doesn't stick to them. It sticks to me.
Mhm.
So do I want to walk through my day with, anger and condemnation, or do I want to walk through my day with, compassion and understanding? I don't know. It's funny, like you sitting at work, and I'm at work at 8 o'clock, and I'm at my desk, and here comes this guy at 9:15, and the first thing that goes through my mind is, look at this slacker.
Mhm.
Can't even make it to work on time. I don't know this guy's situation. I don't know if he has kids he has to drop off at school. Maybe he's in the middle of a divorce. Maybe he's got sick parents. Maybe something but the first thing my mind goes to is not a compassionate place. And that's that negative attribute theory, is a big one for me to overcome, to just give other people some slack and the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if that.
Exactly. And that's a practice. Like there's so many ways you can practice throughout the day. And there's so many distractions for people, like you said, like they don't have to deal with what's going on inside because we're distracting ourselves with drugs, with alcohol, with TV, with so many things that'll numb your pain and make you feel good for a short amount of time. But they're not solving any problems. And I think a big thing is, like you said, just being aware of how you're reacting to things and how do you want to show up. One thing I've been practicing lately is, my day job, I do deliveries and I sell seafood. So I'm driving around, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm being mindful. And then I go in to make my delivery. And I notice that as soon as I walk in the door and start interacting with people, my mindfulness goes away. So then I kind of set the goal that I was going to, okay, when I open the door, I'm going to try and be mindful or be aware with my whole interaction in there. Cause I noticed that as soon as I started having interactions with people, then it all just kind of goes away. So that's one thing I've been practicing a lot lately. And, there's a million things that we can work on. But we need to have that awareness first of, why am I thinking this? Why do I think that guy's a slacker? Why am I judging this person? I catch myself judging people all the time. We just see a guy on the street. Oh, look at that so-and-so. Like, why am I thinking that? And, being aware of it, and then you can, make the shift to change it. I guess that's a spiritual practice right there. Everything. There's so many different ways that you can use your awareness to practice that stuff, but you have to be aware first. And I've really been working on my awareness lately, and I've been meditating for a long time, so that helps too. But I feel like I'm living in a lucid dream. Like I'm walking around, but I'm not in the dream state anymore. It's like I'm aware, and I feel like I'm awake in a dream is kind of what I've been feeling like lately. That is sounds kind of weird to say it out loud, but I told that to my wife the other day. I think she thinks I'm a little bit weird sometimes, but it's like I'm awake in the dream.
Yeah, no, my wife definitely knows I'm weird. No, it's definitely. It's a good point that you raise. It's like I've worked in logistics and transportation, and for years and years, that involved, moving freight, moving international freight, cargo. You're on the phone with different people, that are trying to navigate this kind of system. And really what I need when I pick up the phone is I need someone else's help. So I pick up the phone, when I call somebody and they pick up the phone, I said, "Hi, this is Michael Pedersen. How are you today?" And there's a pause. And they're like, "I'm okay. How are you?" "I'm doing really good. I need your help." And just those 7 or 8 words lay the foundation for a decent interaction. I remember times, years ago, where this poor customer service, rep, their only mistake that they made was picking up the phone. And then they get to deal with me and my smart mouth and bad attitude, all day long. If you want to have a better reaction, like you said, walk in the door, put a smile on your face. People are either going to smile too, or they're not going to want to deal with you. So listen, I'm not in a smiley face mood today. Go away. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. How do we get there? Like we said, it's really kind of a practice. And the meditation is one thing. The meditation that we do on our own, our daily practice, our personal practice is very, very private. It's very, very personal. It's very, very intimate. And that's another part of, like I said, stumbling blindly through your day. We are not conditioned as a society to sit down and pay attention to me. How do I feel? What's going on with me today? So part of that practice is, things like this, discussions between open people, getting information, finding people who want what you have. I work a lot with Hector Marcel because, when I'm around that guy, he just has this feeling that, what, everything's going to be okay. Now, it's not the world is okay, but the way his posture is, his spiritual posture, and that's one of the things he says, well, how's your spiritual posture today? He really kind of has this ability to just step out easy, like he lives in his own skin. And I really find that attractive because for a long, long time, I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I always felt that I had to transform. I had to be somebody else. When I get here, then I'll be happy. So finding the people who want what you have, the teachers, and that goes, all the way to Buddha, Jesus, whoever, Allah, whatever you want to call it. It's that ideal of, and the word Buddha, there was no one named Buddha. Buddha literally means awakened. So it's like there's that guy who Buddha'd. The idea is an awakened individual. So finding someone who has a message that you like, and then following it, diving into it, delving into it, looking at the writings, looking at the literature. You could be anything from, a book that was written, this summer to Sanskrit text from 3,000 years ago. All of these things really kind of contain the message. And then the third aspect of that is really the community that you choose to participate in. Because I can sit by myself and meditate and I can read all the literature that I want. I'm only going to go so far. It's when you step out and surround yourself with like-minded people. Like I said, doing, working and living with soul, going in and meditating with a group, finding a meditation group. I know you have a meditation group that you work with. Go and sit and meditate with other people. Be part of, some sort of spiritual community. And those things, the teachers, the word, the teachings, and the community make up the three legs of the stool that you meditate on. They're the three aspects. It's what in Buddhism we call the three jewels. It's those three concepts linked together will empower you. I've read so many spiritual books, I can taste the ink through my fingers. It didn't help me be a better person. I had to get out there and practice. And in doing so, I had to, find a spiritual community, whatever that is. Now, I hang around with a whole bunch of greasy bikers. A lot of those guys are spiritual dudes. They have families, they have careers. They're trying to get through life just like me. Everyone that you work with that wants to have a conversation like this. It's important stuff to talk about. It really, really is. And it's stuff that I think with discussions about spirituality and mental health, I think we're really, really blessed to be alive when we are, right now, because conversations like this, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago, you and I would have been burned at the stake as witches just for talking about stuff like this.
Yep.
So we're really in an amazing period, an amazing point in history and in our lives.
Absolutely. And I remember, like what you said about just smiling at someone and saying hello to them. I started practicing that, and that could be a daily practice, just saying hi to people and smiling at them. And I started that a year or two ago, and I started just when I was out for walks. Hello, how are you today? And smiling at them and everyone I interacted with. But now it's become like a habit for me. Like I can do it without thinking about it. So that could be a practice for someone just saying, okay, today I'm going to smile at everybody and I'm going to ask them how they're doing. And it's amazing. You go to a restaurant and the server comes up and they're supposed to say, hey, how are you today? But I usually say it first to them, like, how's your day going today? And they're just like, whoa, thank you for asking. But they're also just like, why do you care? Because no one else is caring. No one else is asking me that. But it's just amazing how just something so simple can brighten someone's day. And I used to think a long time ago, like, how can one person like me make a difference in the world? But that's one small thing that you can make a huge difference in the world. But I used to think, oh, it's impossible for just one person like me to make a difference. But even just doing that makes a difference in the world, because that's going to brighten that person's day. Then they're going to give it off to the next person. Then they're going to give it to the next person. And it's just going to be like a ripple effect that can spread across the whole world.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big aspect of mindfulness. Not only how do my interactions with people help me to maintain my own spirituality, but it's also an opportunity to literally change somebody else's life. I walk into the coffee shop, and there's 30 people in line, and everybody wants a double whip, no mocha, extra cream. It's like, and you could see the person that's the only one there, and they're going crazy. And I'll get up to the front, and I wanted something complicated, and I'll say, you know what, just give me a black coffee. Let me make it easy on you today. What can you do to help them? And it's those simple acts of kindness, just those simple acts of kindness. Just like you said, just a smile. You can change somebody else's day.
Absolutely.
Becomes perception. There's another trick that I use. When I'm out in public, I try and imagine that my thoughts are floating in bubbles over my head that other people can read, that other people can see. Because entertaining those, if I didn't want to share it, really kind of why am I thinking it that way? So it's a matter of controlling your own inner dialogue. And it's little tips and tricks like that, smiling at people. When I'm walking around with a smile on my face, it's really hard to be upset. You know, it is, regardless of the day that I've had. And when
And
you play,
when you're smiling, it's going to make yourself feel good too. I used to, when I used to work this one job and I hated my life so much, I used to drive to work with a pen in my mouth, and I would make myself smile the whole way because I heard that would make you happy. And it works a little bit. And if just even if you just fake it at the beginning, it's going to make your day better as well.
and that's a lot of practice, is bring the body, the mind will follow. Because a lot of times, especially in the very, very beginning, trying to meditate is very, very frustrating. You know, it
Yeah.
really, really is. It's like, this is not working. I can't get it. I can't pay attention. Practice. It's a practice. And the very first thing that you learn in that is to just be merciful on yourself. You know, you're not going to shut your brain off. You're not going to be an amazing guru floating on a cloud, in 3 weeks. Like I said, I know people that have been meditating, for years and years and years. And whatever helps you, in that spiritual practice, if you want to get, some pictures or some candles or some incense or whatever you want to do, whatever, it's your practice, make it your own. The other thing to, that I always caution about, spirituality, there's a lot of different flavors. There's a lot of stuff that's been written out there. Um, the beliefs and the dogmas where, what we're looking for is refuge. We're looking for a place of safety. We're looking for a place where I can just sit and relax and I don't have to worry about being eaten alive, today. 98% of the species on the planet, their biggest concern at the moment is what's going to eat me before sundown. We're very, very lucky that we don't live in those situations anymore. That I don't have to worry, at that level of depth, about, what is going to happen to me on a daily basis. I get the blessing of being able to just relax a little bit, and think about the fact that we've really mustered to be in a place in your life where you can actually sit and have a conversation about spirituality and think about spirituality and how can I change my life and become a happier person. There are people in the world who don't know if their house is going to be standing by the end of the day. There are wars, there's all kinds of things going on. We are incredibly, incredibly fortunate, to be where we are. The other half of that, and I know a lot of people, I get into discussions and heated discussions with a lot of people about, they believe that the religions of the world have caused a lot of the problems that we have, and that's the only issue that I have with a lot of the different dogmas. In order for a belief to be a refuge, it has to be completely inclusive and it has to be free of fear. So the beliefs that I've come across where it's like you have to wear this hat and eat this food and stand like this on this day or you're going to hell. Sorry, no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. I do not believe that you're going to get to the end of this amazing trial that is life on this planet. You're a meat tractor stuck to a rock hurtling through space. It's like, if I believe that I've survived this and I'm going to get to the end of it and somebody's going to, oh, well, you read the wrong book. Sorry, you're going to burn in hell. No, sorry. Those I'm not interested. If that works for you, fantastic. But the whole idea is that a refuge must be all inclusive. All are welcome. Anyone is welcome to participate, and there can be no element of fear involved in it. That unless you do this, you're going to go burn in hell for it. Yeah. No, thank you. You can keep that. Seriously. Not
Absolutely.
just grew up with that. I'm not interested in it anymore.
I like to think that heaven and hell is not a place that we're going to go. It's a place that we are right now, and we can choose to either live in heaven or we could live in hell. Is the kind of the way I look at it. And hell is if you're living at a lower consciousness or in your lower energy centers, in fear and anger and all that. And heaven is kind of when you raise your consciousness and you're living kind of up here. That's the way I like to look at it, and I've heard it kind of described that way. So that's my personal belief on heaven and hell.
You just said it, your perspective, it's your choice. You
Yeah.
know, you can choose any concept of spirituality that you like, provided that it makes sense to you, and that it doesn't create that level of cognitive dissonance, and there's nothing in the world that says that, everything will be good if we're the only people on the planet with this belief. That's that's not how it works. We're all created. We're all creations of life. We're all extensions, of the universe. If you believe in the human soul and you believe that, we each carry that spark of the infinite, then really what you come down to is that we are creation experiencing life. When you think about that, really, that we are a spark of creation experiencing life. And then what it requires you to do is to turn to the person sitting next to you and say, "Wow, the face of God," because that other person is exactly the same, regardless of what they believe. As human beings, we are 99.98% exactly the same, geologically, genetically, physiologically, molecularly, atomically, exactly the same. And what do we do as a society? We focus on the 0.02% that says you're different than
Mhm.
me. The Dalai Lama says you start with the concept that every single person that you meet has a mind, a body, and feelings, and that they want to be free from suffering, and know peace. If you approach human beings with those categories first, then every single person you're meeting on even footing. Every single person that you meet can be your friend. It's when we as society start to impose black, white, Muslim, Jew, that's when we start to segregate each other. But we're all exactly the same. And we all want the same thing. We're all just really trying to get through. It's like I've worked with people over the people like, oh my God, the people in China, they hate America. No, they don't. They want to do their job, have a beer, and go home and sit with their kids. They want the same thing that we do. Everyone wants the same thing. We just want to try and get through this meat grinder, as peacefully, as happily, and as fulfilled as possible. The beautiful part about that is, in order to achieve that, I have to get out of myself and try and help the next person. That's the greatest aspect of a spiritual life, is to find some. You want to get out of here. You're having a bad day. Pick up the phone and start calling your friends. You're gonna find somebody who's going through a bunch of crap, and you're gonna feel a lot better just by listening to them, just by taking the time to reach out and try and make someone else's day a little bit better. I go
Ab-
back to, not to lean into, any kind of dogma or anything. The prayer of St. Francis is really, really beautiful, to understand rather than to be understood, to bring happiness where there is sadness, to bring light where there's darkness. And that's our role. That's our job, in this world. And, the beauty of it is that the universe wants you to be happy, and it will help you if you align yourself. It's really easy. A lot of times it's like, how do you know if what you're doing is the right choice? Pick a direction and start walking. If it's wrong, you'll find out, because you start to meet resistance. You start to meet roadblocks. You start banging your head up against the wall, and that's when you have to turn right, and just make a change. The universe wants you to be happy. It's not throwing all these things in your path. But those obstacles that we come up against are really, huge opportunities for growth. The massive changes in my life in the past 2 years, really kind of being open to that. I really could have fought it tooth and nail, and made myself very, very unhappy. But, allowing the universe to give me the blessings that it was trying to, you know, is a big part of
Absolutely. And those challenges we go through, we need to go through those challenges to become a better person sometimes, to become the person that we're meant to be.
it.
It's not supposed to be easy. That's what I keep telling myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's, gold is refined in a crucible. It gets really, really hot in there, but when you come out, it's pure and brilliant. You
Yeah,
know, you just got to endure it while you're in the crucible. But this too shall pass. That's the other thing, is that
exactly. Yeah.
this too shall pass. Whatever you really, really is, oh my God, the biggest heartache of your life, 2 weeks, probably have a hard time remember what it was.
Exactly.
Mm.
That was awesome, Michael. Well, we're getting near the end of our time here. Before we wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners? Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you'd like to add?
It's been a really, really good conversation. I really love the insight that you've brought, and to thank you for the opportunity to just have, conversations like this. Like I said, this has been a massive shift in my life, starting in 2022. Um, my mother got sick. My wife got diagnosed with cancer, and my brother thought it would be a good time to move to Oklahoma and join a fundamentalist Christian military preparedness enclave, leaving me all alone with a woman that I have not gotten along with in a long, long time. And I had to figure out really kind of how to do this. And what happened is I opened my laptop and I started writing, and I didn't even know what I was writing. But what I come up with, now I'm basically finishing up, my second manuscript. But writing became my tool. It became part of my spiritual practice, and the stories that I've been writing are really kind of emotionally charged, and I'm like sitting there at the computer, like this writing very, very poignant stuff and crying and looking back at it. This was my way of dealing with it. This was my process of how I really kind of dealt with the grief of what I was, because a lot of it required, like, you have no time for this. You have to show up. There are a lot of people that are expecting you to be there. There are a lot of people that need you and that I want to be there for. So how do I deal with this? Let spirituality into your life. You will find the channel. Just ask. Just ask. And we talk about two things, prayer and meditation. Prayer is the petition. Dear God, please help me not to choke the crap out of everyone today. Meditation is listening to the response and listening to the answer. Like I said, I can't profess to be a spiritual person and then run out and treat people poorly. So the biggest part is understanding what you really, really want to achieve in a spiritual practice and listening, letting the universe give it to you. That's the biggest part of me, is letting go of that fear. All these different things have been coming in place for me to, all of a sudden writing coaches show up, they start showing up on my feed, I start getting reaching out from different, I get pulled into different writing communities. I didn't ask for any of this, I just started looking around. This is the universe trying to help me, bringing it to me. So stop fighting the goodness that the world is trying to bring you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Michael. That was great, man. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having this space and having this platform. Thank you for your, your meditation groups and, all your posts, that I see, Transformative Pathways. I love the stuff that you put out there. A lot of times, and I can't tell you, a lot of